Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Amity Airfield is a very iconically difficult scenario in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, and as a result it has been a very popular scenario for speedrunning since it provides a really nice challenge. Wait, speedrunning? How do you even speedrun RollerCoaster Tycoon, and especially a scenario with a fixed deadline? Well, there are two ways. If you play the original game, then to allow for speedrunning, the scenario counts as completed as soon as you hit the goal requirements. Amity Airfield requires 3000 guests and a park rating of 600, so whoever gets to that the quickest wins. The deadline is at the end of year 4, which takes about 3 hours and 45 minutes to reach, but the record for reaching these requirements the quickest is less than 1 hour, at 46 minutes and 57 seconds, and was done by yours truly. In this speedrun I focused on two main things. First, I made sure that the guests spawned as quickly as possible, and then I also made sure that no guest ever wanted to leave the park. This means that once 3000 guests have spawned, I have also immediately reached the goal. The problem with a speedrun like this is that once you have these two things optimized, the only thing that makes a difference is random things like getting awards, and there is no more skill increase really. This is where OpenRCT2 comes in, which is the one that is used in the fast forward % category. In this category you are allowed to use any feature that OpenRCT2 offers to make it faster, except for the cheat and debug menus, and my god is it faster. There are a ton of small features that help out, but the big one is the speed up function. OpenRCT2 allows you to speed up the game to 2 times, 4 times, 8 times and 128 times the standard speed. With that 128 times speed it becomes an entirely different game. In the vanilla game it's all about constantly maximizing guest spawning and minimizing how many guests leave the park, but that is often not the most optimal route in OpenRCT2. Here you usually first build your setup and then increase the speed to the maximum in order to get all the guests as fast as possible. As a result, the setup process becomes a much larger part of the run, and if you can reduce that significantly, then it might still be faster even if you now do need a few more months to get the guests, as those months fly by super quickly and take almost no time at all. Until very recently, my personal best on Amity Airfield using OpenRCT2 was 2 minutes and 57 seconds, and this is what I did. First, I built one custom vertical drop roller coaster with a very long queue line and a long minimum waiting time, so that it would have a very low throughput. The reason I'm building it now here instead of having it saved ahead of time is that that is not allowed. You can use any saved designs that come with the game, but if you want a custom design you will need to build it during the run itself. I then saved the design and built a whole bunch more of these coasters in order to be able to store a lot of the 3000 guests we need in their queue lines. Once the coasters were built, I hit the speed up button to go to hyperspeed and started hiring staff and building some stalls. After this, the only thing left to do is advertise until we hit the 3000 guest mark, which we hit after 2 minutes and 57 seconds. This is a great example of how the setup is such a big part of these runs. It took me 1 minute and 41 seconds to build everything I needed before I started speeding up. At this point I still had just 1 guest in the park, but then it takes only 1 minute and 16 seconds to get to 3000 guests. There is more time to be saved in the setup process than the guest getting process here. When I did this run it was the world record, but it was quickly beaten by a speedrunner who goes by the name Hey There, I'm Dad. Hey There, I'm Dad is a fantastic player who excels in the mechanical side of it. His strategy is not that much different from mine, and the only major difference is a different queue line design on the coaster. Yet, where it took me 1 minute and 41 seconds to build the setup, it took him only 1 minute and 10 seconds. And his setup is also a bit better at retaining guests, as he then gets to the required 3000 guests in just 49 seconds, resulting in a blazing fast time of 1 minute and 59 seconds. This was a big new record and stood for a while, and it is still the fastest run that builds a fairly normal park. Of course, 10 identical coasters with queue lines that trap guests isn't entirely normal, but the guests are still going on rides in a normal fashion here. That would all change when a new glitch was discovered. When a ride has 2 entrances right above each other, like this utterly useless lift, the guests lose all concept of personal space and stand right on top of each other in the queue line, allowing for an infinite number of guests to join. Now simply slap a bunch of TVs on there and you have a perfect guest trap. And this is exactly what runner Sparky L did. He built the lift with 2 entrances on the same tile, and that's basically the entire setup. It took him only 37 seconds to start speeding up, and after 1 minute and 39 seconds he reaches the goal and breaks the world record by 20 seconds. And I don't like it. Now, this is nothing against Sparky L, but this glitch is only present in some versions of OpenRCT2 and not in the vanilla game. The speedrunning rules say that you can use any official release version of OpenRCT2, which I think is a good rule as I wrote it and old versions can be very useful. So this glitch is allowed and Sparky did nothing wrong, but that doesn't change that it kind of leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I'm all for using the optimizations that OpenRCT2 brings, but a game-breaking bug that only exists because of the mod that we use is kind of against the spirit of it in my opinion. Luckily, I don't have to worry about that anymore, as a few days ago I did this run. Yes, that's right, I beat Amity Airfield in just 49.8 seconds and halved the previous world record of 1 minute 39. How on earth is this possible? The success of this strategy hinges on the so-called ride distraction method that I used very successfully in my previous video and also works in the vanilla game. Basically, if the guests are constantly heading for something, stay happy and are able to buy and consume food, they will never leave the park. Guests will always want to head for a free transport ride when it's considered, so if you build one transport ride close to the entrance, you're golden. There are 2 reasons that in this run, out of all the available transport ride types, I chose to build a lift. Firstly, it is a sheltered ride, so people will still go on it when it's raining and not leave the park. And secondly, it's the only transport ride that cannot break down, which is very important as guests will also leave the park if the only ride in the park breaks down. That's the ride done, but we also have the stalls that I built. The cotton candy stall is there for them to buy food, and the drinks and toilet are additional distractions. Guests don't always 100% of the time head for rides, and there is a chance that they will leave when they're not doing that. They will eventually want to buy a drink and or go to the toilet, in which case they'll be heading for those 2 stalls as well. This decreases the chances of a guest leaving, allowing us to get to the 3000 guests we need quicker as we need to spawn fewer guests. After this, I hire an entertainer to keep the guests happy, as that is also very important, and then we start advertising. We could build some more rides to also get some natural guest generation in addition to that from ads, but you lose more time with the setup of that than that you gain during the guest generation process. Okay, so that's the general strategy, but there is a lot more to this exact run that makes it so incredibly fast. Firstly, I'm using version 0.3.5 as that has less lag than newer versions and also has a few other tiny ways that the game works differently that work in my favor here. When I open the scenario, I immediately press space 2 times. This both rotates the screen twice and opens the park information window, as I made it a hotkey for both of those actions. This window is of course already open when you start a scenario, but opening it again resets it to the default tab where you can open the park instead of the goal tab. In newer versions, it no longer changes the tab in this situation, which is one of the reasons that I'm using the older version. Before starting the scenario, I already positioned my mouse in such a way that it is exactly on the open park button, which I click, after which I click on the button to locate the park entrance. Then I alternate between using the R hotkey to open the build right menu and the Z hotkey to close all windows. The Sky Tower lift pre-build is fairly cheap and we can afford it without needing a loan. When everything is built, I press S to open both the finance window and on top of it the staff window. This allows me to really quickly hire an entertainer before speeding up the game, taking out a loan and starting the advertisement campaigns. In earlier runs I also increased the park entry fee, but at some point I realized that just the loan is enough to consistently be able to afford to advertise, and this saves us some really precious seconds. The reason I put finances on the staff hotkey is that now I only have 4 different keys to press with my left hand during the run. I can position my thumb and 3 fingers correctly on the space, R, S and Z keys ahead of time and won't need to move them around during the run, which leads to much fewer mistakes. This does mean that when I start advertising, the entertainer window is still open, which will cause extra lag as the guests all need to be rendered there as well. So once I've taken out all the ads, I close everything with the Z key, move the screen away so that stuff doesn't need to be rendered, and reopen the finance window just in time to start renewing the ads. From now, all I need to do is keep buying new advertisements until we reach 3000 guests. You may be wondering why my UI is so incredibly big. The finances window takes up almost the entire screen. OpenRCT2 allows you to change the scaling factor, which makes all the windows and buttons smaller or larger. Usually I play at 2 or 2.5, but here I'm using a scaling factor of 3.75, which makes the UI super large, and there is a purpose to it. This is a scaling factor of 3.5, 1 instance smaller, and when I click on an ad, the sub menu opens on the other side of the screen, which is far away and needs a lot of mouse movement. If we do the same with the scaling factor of 3.75, there isn't enough room on the other side, so it spawns on the same side, which is much closer and faster. I could also resize my playing window to achieve a similar or the same effect, but I like playing in full screen. Now that you know how the run works, let's see it again in its entirety. We're nearly at the end, and I'm still just focusing on renewing the ads when we reach the goal of 3000 guests in July year 2, just 49.833 seconds after we opened the scenario. This is so much faster than the previous record, as not only is the setup much faster, but my guest count increased quicker as well. Here are the previous 3 times that we talked about, with both the setup time and the time spent getting guests. Note that because Hey There I'm Dad has a bunch of coasters attracting guests naturally alongside the ads, he actually got guests quicker than Sparky. But Sparky had a much shorter setup time, which made his final time significantly quicker. My time of 49 seconds has just 10 seconds of setup and then also gets all the guests in just 39 seconds. There is no natural guest generation in this park after the 100 or so that the lift and stalls attract, but guests stay in this park so well that only about 3500 of them need to enter to get 3000 to still be in the park simultaneously. And this is what leads to the shorter speed up time. I'm of course incredibly happy with the super fast time, but I'm also very happy with the fact that this right distraction strategy that I used also works in the vanilla game. This speedrun is fast because of things like new hotkeys, the scaling factor and the speedup function, not because of a new game-breaking glitch that only exists in OpenRCT2. This method will be able to be used to break the record on a whole load of other scenarios, and of course my Amity Airfield run wasn't perfect, so that can also be improved. But even if I lose my record to mechanically better players again, I am still the first to do it under a minute, and I am proud of that. If you're interested in this whole speedrunning business, click here to learn about what the fastest scenario to complete is. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.